So Jordan Peterson had an interesting podcast with Warren Farrell, who writes often like men's. This has such a bad connotation, men's rights stuff. But he wrote about the pay gap in the past. He wrote. Talked about his last book.
He was a leader in the feminist movement.
A leader in the feminist movement, and felt that they were excluding downtrodden men, and started to speak up, and they were not about that. And what you'll hear about Warren Farrell is that he's this misogynist, yada yada. And as you watch interviews, he's like the softest softy that ever softed. He
talks for a little bit and then goes, I want to give you an opportunity to speak. I feel like I want to center you.
That's not to denigrate him at all. That's just to say that my impression, having heard about him and then having listened to him, were completely different. Mm-hmm. So he had a conversation with Jordan Peterson that made this particular line in that article about dirty jobs stand out to me. And they're talking about dirty jobs, and they give the examples of prison guards and soldiers and factory farmers. Keep in mind, they use one example at the beginning. You know how New York Times often starts with like, Keith Edwards, a blanked blank in this particular place. And they start with the specific and move to the general. There are specific stories about a woman who is a mental health counselor to prison. Mm-hmm. So they say these jobs, it falls proportionally to people with fewer choices and opportunities, such as high school graduates from depressed rural areas, undocumented immigrants, women, and people of color. And I went, hold the phone. You're exactly wrong here. It falls disproportionately to men to do these dirty jobs. Like, how did you get this exactly wrong? If you were to exclude gender, I could understand that. But these dirty jobs and the ones that they listed, operating in a prison system, being a soldier, working in these factory farms, you can go on and list like the morally difficult or gray or dubious areas. Those very, very clearly fall to men. And I was just like, it is. And so I'm watching this thing with Jordan Peterson, and Warren Farrell is talking about the ideology that is in there, and just how there is this deep-rooted belief, because he's worked both with the Republican Party under Trump and now Democrats under Biden to try to get these dad initiatives included in the gender days. And he said, I love what you're doing with women. Can we include men? And he says, really, the pushback is different from Republicans and Democrats. Republicans, it's political, and they were worried that talking about dads is going to make Trump look bad if he gets up there and gives a speech about absentee fathers. But for the Democrats, it is a sincere belief that women have it worse. Mm-hmm. And as I think evidence is that by this particular line, just as one example, they cannot see the ways in which men so evidently are disproportionately have it worse. Now, I've talked on the podcast, I actually don't think it's helpful to split into groups of men and women. Like, let's just talk about people that have these dirty jobs.
Yeah, even if it's 90%, 10%, just go, let's just help.
Prison guards who have to witness hell. And if it's 90% men and 10% women, like, you're all included, don't worry about it. This isn't going to be a gender.
We're not going to only do PTSD for Marines who are men. One gender or the other. Yeah,
because most Marines,
Marines with PTSD.
Yeah, most combat veterans are men.
You're just saying if you were going to list a gender, but you're saying if you were going to list a gender for these particular jobs, it wouldn't be the one the New York Times listed.
It's exactly wrong. Yeah. And it's so wrong in such obvious, instantly understandable, checkable ways, using the ones that you've given here. Like if you were to Google any of this, mm-hmm. And it's crazy to me that is so ideologically set. Sorry,
so who did they list?
I'll have to get the article.
I thought you had it written down.
No, I didn't have it written down. But they, from recollection, it was prison guards, soldiers.
No, sorry. You said it was the poor, illegal immigrants, women, and minorities.
High school graduates from depressed rural areas, undocumented immigrants, women, and people of color.
Got it.
And again, people of color is a bit broad. Like, do these jobs fall disproportionately if you were to compare to Asians or white people? I suspect that you're going to find far more of these morally dubious jobs falling to, yes, Latin immigrants, but probably more white people comparatively to Asian people.
Maybe the New York Times just has a copy-paste they do for their articles.
I think they do. I think these broad strokes form the foundation of how many of these writers see the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, I'm like, how can you be so wrong? And it was just one line, but it stuck out with me particularly because of having watched that thing.
Sure.
So I'll see. There was just a couple other interesting points that they mentioned in that Warren Farrell piece, or the Warren Farrell podcast. Oh, I don't know about that. They were talking about the workplace and men and women. And they talk about how, rightly or wrongly, and we've talked about this on our main channel, the currency of male social interactions tends to be witty put-downs. Like, it tends to be how men speak to one another. And that this isn't all workplace harassment, and they make that very clear, but that teasing in the workplace may be perceived as discrimination by women when some men, it's actually an element of inclusion. Like, if you are being teased or put down in those sorts of ways that are not necessarily overtly sexual or anything like that, that you're being included. And one of the things that he said is that 19-1, so 95% of complaints, according to one sort of study that he found, to HR come from women compared to men. Now, obviously, some subset, probably a large one, are related to sexual harassment or other things. But his hypothesis is that the way that men and women socialize is fundamentally, or not fundamentally, has different elements to it.
Sure. Which is call it cultural, call it genetic, doesn't really matter. That's just where we're at today. Is that most men interact with men differently than most women interact with women. That's what they're saying.
And that is part of, though not all of, the difficulty at work. And then, they go on. I haven't been in a traditional workplace, so I have a hard time really connecting with a lot of this.
It reminds me a little bit, I can give a little anecdotal little story that's tangentially related, and I don't have there's no moral to the story, but this is what happened at one of my offices. Was no one liked the job. Everyone looked forward to the lunch break. On the lunch break, we had one TV in the kitchen, and it was always on SportsCenter, and the guys loved that. And the partners would come in and watch while they ate, and the analysts would come in and watch while they ate, and they would all talk sports. And everyone was invited, but it happened to be that the three women that were in my analyst class didn't have an interest in sports. So because they were bored of that, they would eat separately, self-selected to eat separately. They felt excluded because of that. So they reported it to HR. So HR banned sports from the TV in the lunchroom, which made all the partners really upset.
Yeah.
And so then instead of going to the lunchroom to eat, all the partners would eat at their desks, streaming sports on their computers, and then we would eat in the lunchroom, like the 8 of us. But it didn't end up fostering strong relationships between the genders because we still didn't have a lot of things in common, except there were two people that ended up having sex with each other.
Was there resentment there about?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure there was resentment there. And I am positive that if a woman had been interested in sports and come in and wanted to watch SportsCenter and talk sports with everyone else, she would have been absolutely included. And I'm also positive that I felt excluded when golf was on.
Yeah.
Because I've never golfed in my life. I never watched golf. I could have named pre-working one golfer, Tiger Woods. I didn't know who anyone else was. Mm-hmm. And I would just shut up.
Were there guys that didn't care at all about sports, to your knowledge? You might not even have noticed
those guys. Yes, but they would still just come in there and hang out and shoot the shit and not talk about sports. But they would just put up with the sports
talk.
That
was me, to be clear.
And they would still just hang out. And I don't know if that's the right call, the wrong call, but I just know the outcome was not stronger ties amongst the analysts, nor was it positive feelings from the partners. And maybe that's like a step you have to take on the road to wherever they're going. But that's what happened in my office. So they just went, oh, okay, sports are making you guys feel unincluded. We'll just turn it off. And everyone's like, oh, all right, well, first of all, the partners just stopped showing up. They said we'd rather watch SportsCenter than hang out with our analysts. So we're going to watch on our laptops.
Yeah.
And then we just all watched. I mean, not even watched. The news was just on in the background while we all ate without it. So yeah, that's what happened in my office. And I don't know how you get where we want to go, which is everyone feels included and everyone's excited to be there. But this was, if we can't get everyone excited to be there, let's just make sure everyone's included and no one's excited to be there.
Yeah.
And now we're just watching with some guy jawing on the background about news no one cares about. And we still have this weird gender divide because we also just happen to have different interests.
Yeah. One of the things that they sort of talk about, and they talk about it somewhat directly, somewhat it's intimated, but that men and women face problems differently. Now, it's, of course, I really do, and you guys have heard me talk about this, there are some men that don't fit into this category. There are some women that don't fit into this category. Broadly, this is where people tend to land. But I think it's important to always just keep in mind that these are not monoliths, and I don't want to treat them as such.
Bell curves with different averages, but super fat tails in both directions, such that there can be a ton of people from either camp that fit the description of the opposite camp extremely closely.
that problems for men, one at a base level, that women often like to commiserate, feel into their problems, and when they don't know necessarily what to do with them, they will look to authority figures to step in. And boys, probably through a lot of socialization, are socialized to see themselves as the problem and then do what they can to adjust and fit in, and have a sense that if you tell an authority figure, you can't do that.
Oh yeah, well, you just get bullied. You just get bullied by your peers. I mean, to be honest, I have no idea what it's like to grow up as a woman, so maybe that happens for women too. But as a guy,
there's definitely female bullying. I mean,
as a guy, if you tell the teacher, it's not going to get better for you. Oh, I mean, when the teacher's around, it will. But like, at least where I grew up, there's a payment. You got to pay for being a narc, and I think that still was true, at least in the workplace. It wasn't a physical beating that you were going to have like you might in elementary school, but you were going to pay a social cost if you were reporting something to HR that made the other men like the situation less.
Yes. Yeah. So it was, they talk about the workplace, and Jordan Peterson says his damning line, like, it's not obvious that men and women can coexist in the workplace, and he recognizes that people freak out at that, but just that it's 50 years old, and we are seeing, perhaps we can work these problems out, but we are seeing the different styles clash and create fears on both sides, and concerns. Women's fear of being, often what is false to the women's fear of being either excluded or cut out from promotional opportunities, or purposely left out because she's not one of the boys' clubs. Men's fears of being, of being harassed sexually. Men's fears of being falsely accused of those harassments, of having to make nice with someone that they don't necessarily connect with, of leaving the door open. So they talk about all those different sorts of things, and it was interesting, particularly in light of that New York Times article. That was the piece that I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, also in the New York Times article, they just. Again, this is just one person, so I can't say they, but this is the sense that I have when I read these types of things.
From the New York Times specifically, or just any articles?
Pretty well, that's a fair point. New York Times is a great example of them, but Washington Post and LA Times as well. One of the things in that initial article that I mentioned that they also wrote, another line, is the elites are also less, they talk about elites who have dirty jobs. The elites are also less likely to be shamed and stigmatized for what they do than to be envied. And I thought that really missed, I feel like the most stigmatized group of people in America is bankers. I don't think that, now maybe not in their immediate circle, but certainly at large, if you ask people who you hate more, soldiers or bankers, who do you hate more? People who operate factory farms or bankers?
It's a costless stigma, though, I will say.
Yeah.
No one does anything to your face. It doesn't cost you any friendships. It doesn't cost you anything. People will talk shit on you from afar, but even if you interact with that same person and they find out you're an investment banker, no one does anything. Whereas I could imagine military members getting spit on by someone who just absolutely hates the military, or a prison guard just having a really tough time at work, or whatever it is, The banker stigma does not come with a cost.
Well, this is, I guess the stigma, the politician stigma, I think definitely does, right? We have to acknowledge that one comes with a cost.
In terms of
social stigma,
people looking through your life?
No, a social stigma if you're a politician, dealing with real world consequences of people actually hating you. If you are, any of the 535 people involved in the Senate or the House.
I guess it depends. Are you talking about social media hate, or are you talking about someone meets you, finds out you're a governor, and then changes their behavior because they found out you're a governor?
I think what you've definitely done right there is distinguish between two types of stigma. And one is people talk shit on politicians all day and might spit on them or throw things at them from a crowd. But I think if you have the opportunity to be close to a politician in a non-hidden way, you would probably respond more to their status than to their particular job.
I'm genuinely trying to narrow down what the cost of the stigma is. Because, for instance, if you are at a bar, if you're at a rooftop bar, and you're on a business trip and they're on a business trip, and you meet them and they say, oh yeah, I'm a senator for Kansas or Pennsylvania. I struggle to imagine anything besides just, and then maybe you walk away if you're disinterested. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if there's...
Well, I think for politicians and bankers, it's what you mentioned earlier, is large scale social media anonymous hate, and you are less likely to be brigaded. Now, there's sometimes pickets outside of like, the major Wall Street firms or stuff like that, but you're less likely to have an in-person interaction go poorly. And
especially for an investment banker, I think even more so than a politician.
I think because in person, what people are responding to is status, which is they recognize this guy's got influence and money. I better make nice.
Yeah, it also doesn't necessarily say on your Instagram that you are an investment banker. So there's how are people going to hunt you down if they're trying to be angry at everyone that works at JP Morgan?
Now, I don't know because I don't know the associated hits that a prison guard takes to their social life or to interactions, how people treat them at whether they're at a party or a bar or something like that, if they do stuff on factory farms. I have no idea what that is, though I could imagine that it sometimes, though from the elite, it's interesting. I kind of what I'm seeing is that like elites look down on low-class dirty jobs, and what you could say, and I don't mean pejoratively, like low-class people look down on elite dirty jobs, and we both go, I would never, that's horrible, without really recognizing that people take the jobs that are offered to them from the positions that they have in an attempt to try to make their lives better economically.
I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know what job actually has this, but I can't off the top of my head think of a job that has a stigma that comes at a cost for your personal life other than something related to sex work.
Abortion clinics, running an abortion clinic.
Sure, that'll do it in the South.
Yeah, like that's deadly. There's been some bombs.
Not going to affect you in DC. No, I'm saying you meet someone. You're like, oh, hey, what's up? What do you do? And then you say what you do, and then violence ensues, or people don't want to relate to you or be your friend, or people are upset that you're dating their daughter. I guess maybe that last one, I can think of a lot of jobs that maybe certain dads or moms would be against. But yeah, a lot of the stigma seems like it just comes from strangers from afar for all these jobs.
Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.